I feel alive.
Welcome to the ADVMoto podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Slayball, and on this podcast we choose a theme and talk with writers about that theme. So the theme for this episode is special moments. Now, when you think of special moments in relation to adventure riding, is it maybe you're on a vista somewhere and have reached that mountaintop experience, or maybe is it having that amazing plate of food somewhere in the world that you just, can't forget about and need to go back and get it? Or does it involve people or not involve people? Is it something to do that you chase after that moment, or is it something that you just let happen? So in this episode, you get to meet two writers. We have Nikki, who goes by Kiwicruisette on Instagram, and she just finished a 48-state around the United States 6-month tour in search of what is the American dream. And she was on her Suzuki Savage, and she's going to talk about some of her special moments on the trip. And then you get to meet Filmmaker Sterling from Motorcycle Travel Channel on YouTube. And you may know Sterling from some of the BDR videos and stuff like that. He's an amazing filmmaker and a great writer. And he brings us along. And it's kind of cool because you're going to, for the listeners on this podcast, you're going to get an auditory treat where you're used to hearing people talking, but you're going to get to hear some wildlife from his trip that he took around the United States. So enjoy. So, Nikki, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Nathan.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know who Nikki is, you should know who she is because she's just spent the last, I don't know how many months on a mission around the United States. And her mission was to figure out what the American dream was and travel all 48 states on the back of her Suzuki Savage. Did I sum it up pretty well?
You did. That was perfect. Thank you for that intro. It was 6 months by the end of it. And I didn't set out necessarily to do 6 months, but that was how long it took before winter really crushed any hope of doing anything longer than that. Yeah. So if you want to, while you're listening to this, want to go check out her social channels, she's at Kiwicruisette on Instagram and then Lunch Cutter Productions on YouTube. And you can see some of what we're going to be talking about on the podcast. But so the theme is special moments for this podcast. But before we get into that, talk a little bit about, I always ask people, how did you get into riding motorcycles in the first place? Yeah. So I started riding when I was a teenager, probably later though, maybe 16, 17 was when I got my first dirt bike. My brothers and my dad had always been into motorbikes, and I was a really wussy child, like really scared all the time. I wanted to be cool and like ride skateboards, and the minute I'd fall off, I'd just cry and forget it. So I had to sort of like grow up a little bit before I realized that I wasn't going to die falling off something. So I got my first dirt bike when I was 17, got my dad to sort of teach me the basics, and I just sort of spend my weekends out on the track, just taking it easy. I called myself a scenic rider. I was never a motocross rider. I did endurance and cross country and had a lot of fun with that. So that got me comfortable on two wheels. And then when I went to university, I really needed a bike that could get me around the traffic situation. We have quite bad traffic in our main city of Auckland, as I think most people do. But also I wanted cheap. So I needed cheap insurance. I wanted cheap registration, barely anything spent on gas. And of course, parking was phenomenal. I could just park outside my classroom. So all that added up to make sense to get a street bike. I actually started on a scooter, and that wasn't going to get me anywhere fast. So once I was happy on the road on two wheels, I got a GZ 250, I think it was, a little Suzuki Cruiser. And that was all I needed until I eventually, one thing after another, I got a 650 in the States. But, for the longest time, I thought 250 is it. That's the fastest I could possibly need. But then I came into contact with some pretty fast drivers that occasionally you need to have that power to boost around. So the 650 is it for me.
Yeah, the American highway system. You hear riders that are riding around the world or, on smaller roads, and then they hit the U.S. interstates, and they're just like, This is so dangerous. And yeah, it's
so crazy. Yeah, I mean, need I say anything more than Florida? Holy moly.
Yeah. Florida drivers have a reputation.
More than it precedes its reputation. It is phenomenal. I don't know how anyone comes out alive. That's the only time on my trip where, one, I thought I could die, and two, I thought I would need something bigger than a 650.
Yeah. I know. I've had a 600 cc motorcycle, and when you go to pass somebody or to merge or whatever, you have it like pinned, and it's thinking about it, and you're like, I'm gonna get there. I think I can kind of thing. Yeah.
I swear that people speed up when you go to pass them too. They go so slow and you're stuck behind them. And the minute you pull out, they put their foot to the accelerator. It's real asshole behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got some road rage in this country. That's for sure. Yeah. So talk a little bit about, your trip first, just kind of set the stage, for everyone. I know it had to do, COVID's kind of the theme that weaves in throughout all of this experience really for you. And it's kind of interesting to me that, doing a trip of this scale in the midst of COVID, is pretty incredible. But yeah, set the stage for everybody. How did you end up, leaving for 6 months in 48 states?
Yeah. So like you say, it did come about because of COVID. The company I was working for in San Francisco, well, actually I should start before then. I immigrated to America, from New Zealand 3 years ago, for work, and absolutely loved my job. It was my pride and joy. I had the best life, I thought. San Francisco didn't really appeal to me, but the job was so good and so in tune with who I was. It meshed with my identity, that I thought, this is it for me. I'm staying here. When COVID hit, the company did a 25% reduction. So it laid off about 2,000 employees. And I was in the HR sort of new employee onboarding realm. And with a hiring freeze happening, there was going to be no new employees. So I predictably got let go. So that was incredibly upsetting, like devastating beyond what I thought it would be. I thought I roll with a lot of punches. I didn't think I'd be that upset, but I was. And so there I was, faced with San Francisco rent prices, which are astronomical for those who don't know, no job. And, it was hard to even think about getting another job, and especially, in HR at that time. So I came up with a plan to move out to Tahoe, just to sort of not have to pay insane prices for rent, but also just try and figure out what was next for me. San Francisco started to feel like a pretty scary place. It was like, I just recall walking those streets and everyone was looking at each other like they were going to be infected by each other, like this fear of just like, today's going to be the day that I catch something from someone on the street. So everyone was just like on edge. And I thought, I'll head away from this. Luckily my roommate was happy for me to go. She wanted the house to herself. She was also very, very scared. So I moved out to a friend's. They had an empty place out in Tahoe. So very fortunate. Once I was there, had my head together, I thought, well, what have I got? I took my motorcycle out with me. I'd sort of strapped all the things I owned. I'd done a trip in a rental car to dump like the furniture and things, but then everything else I had on my bike. And I just thought, well, what you have in front of you is an opportunity, really. You've got time now, which you never had time. And you have money, because I got a severance package. So for the first time, I had the two of those together. What I never pictured was doing this in a pandemic. That was a terrifying prospect, both because I thought, I really had a high chance of catching something if I moved around a lot, but also what would people think of me? Like, this is terrible. They were saying, don't travel. So I thought more and more about how I could mitigate those factors. And I came up with the idea of, if you stayed out of cities, which you don't want to be in anyway right now, and you didn't interact with very many people, just the bare minimum. So we're talking like supermarket runs, gas stations, not really meeting up with friends or people that sound interesting. I get a lot of people sort of saying, you should meet up with my friend. He rides motorbikes. You guys would get along. I had to just like politely decline all those sorts of invitations. And so with all that in place, I thought, no, I can do this. And actually, I'll probably be safer than I would be in a city. So that was that. And I also thought I'm going to be able to get a little bit of control back of my life. Like I felt like I was spinning a bit, and I wasn't able to like feel like the future had a lot of hope when I was just sort of sitting around being laid off. I thought this is going to be me achieving a goal and a dream I've had forever. And then I just had this feeling when I pop out the other end of this, if I pop out the other end of this, I'm going to be on a completely different path. Mm-hmm. And that there, I didn't know what that would look like, but it would be better than sitting around feeling sad.
Yeah. That's amazing. So yeah, it's funny how like sometimes the best, I don't know, trips or adventures come out of adversity, something that wasn't planned. People always, say, oh, I'm planning for this thing or, for this trip or whatever. And like planning's important, but, sometimes like you're saying, you're presented with an opportunity and you have to make that leap, just kind of into the unknown and kind of let, the world and universe, whatever, figure it out. And that's yeah. And that really sounds like that's kind of your story. So touching on, I mean, there's so much stuff we could talk about from your trip. If any of you, again, go check out her Instagram, because you'll see the varied experiences that she had on her trip. But we're kind of talking about special moments today. And if you had to just like choose one off the top of your head, I mean, I know it's hard because you just like literally, for those of you who don't know, I think she just got in on a plane back to New Zealand like last night or 2 nights ago. So like she just finished her trip, and so she's still got jet lag and processing the whole thing. So sorry to throw like heavy questions at you, but if you could like choose a special moment in your trip, like what's one or two that would stand out to you?
Ooh, that is a big question. You know what? I feel quite bad about prefacing the answer to this with what I had just replied. So I said that I was really keeping away from people, which I was, I swear. But of course, special moments often happen when you, by chance, interact with other people. That's what I found. And it did happen. As I was rolling through towns and people were following me on Instagram, I did get, offers for people. They would just be so kind. They'd say, hey, I'm going to talk specifically about this one. John, it was a message from a guy called John. He said, hey, I'm not at I've got a hunting cabin. I'm not there. I'm actually in Iraq. He was serving, and he said, I've got a house that you're more than welcome to go and stay in. And I thought, oh wow, it's so nice. How, it'll just be some little shack, out in the woods. I ended up taking him up on the offer because I knew that we wouldn't be interacting and that would be quite safe. But I arrived there and it was like the most beautiful home I have ever seen in my whole life. He had, he was an avid hunter. He had animals mounted on the walls that I'd never seen in my whole life. And he had vintage pinball machines and vending machines and, pool tables. And he said, use my ATV. I've got, whatever, snowmobile, this and that. And the keys under the, I don't want to tell you where the actual keys are.
Yeah, don't give away the
location. Not that anyone could figure it out. But, and I was overcome by this generosity, right? Because I could literally be anyone. I could be, his trust in humanity really made me feel like I wanted to go out into the world and have, this idea that people are good and we can trust them. And I know that there is sometimes people say, well, that's how you get taken advantage of. But I just thought it was such a lovely gesture of like trust and kindness, and that we can be on edge more than usual because of COVID and think, actually interacting with people is really dangerous. But there's other ways to show people that sort of kindness and generosity. that is safe. And I think in our situation it was. So that was a really, like, I was just overcome by the humanity of that situation. And I think another one would be I got to go and watch a cornfield be harvested in Iowa. So Farmer John and his wife Kathy, they said, come over, we've got corn being harvested. You can come on the combine harvester and we'll teach you about how it's done. And I think what had led up to that special moment was their son had noticed on Instagram that I took a lot of joy out of learning about the real, like the nuts and bolts of people's livelihoods. I would drive past things and I would just hypothesize about how things were done. So I'd often see like a field of something, oil. I now know it's an oil derrick, and I'd pull up and I'd say, what's this? It looks like it's going down. And then, I'd muse about it on Instagram, and sometimes I'd research it and find out what the real case was. But often people would text me and they'd say, oh, that's they call it a donkey pump oil derrick, and often I'd make false claims about what I thought was growing, and people would always correct me, which is really funny. I'd say, oh, that's corn. And someone said, no, that's sorghum. Now I know what sorghum is. Anyway, so he knew that I would be really fascinated to see how corn was made, or harvested, I should say. So he linked me up with his, with Farmer John and Kathy, and I got to go out on this machinery and see how it was all processed. Now I'm a little reluctant to tell you that story because it does, of course, involve me meeting with the people, doesn't it? So that it was still a conversation that I had to have with them around like what we were both comfortable with. We kept our distance. I wore a mask. They chose not to, which was fine with me because they were the older folk. And I felt like, as long as we were both consenting and, I was going out and continuing to, camp alone and not interact with anyone. And they were just purely in their bubble that it was a safe enough agreement. But, I do say that with a little bit of apprehension because it's not exactly protocol. But it was a hugely special moment for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. That was, one of the things when I was thinking about this topic is like, what makes, moments special, like on an adventure, right? Is it the people? Is it the machine? And because I want to talk about your bike in a second, because I know, like, personally, I've had moments where it's just, there's like, you wake up in the morning and you have all your belongings like on the bike and you're going in a direction. Like for me specifically, one was in Yosemite, right? So I stayed the night up in the high Sierras. It came in I believe it's the east entrance, and there's a campground called Tulumna Meadows, and they have a little, like tent cabins, I think they call them. So it's like a tent structure over like a wood, thing with like, kind of cot beds in there and a little wood stove. And anyway, so it was just a wonderful evening. And the next morning woke up and the air was crisp, because it's higher elevation. I was on the bike, and just like that next hour to 2 hours of descending like down into the Yosemite Valley. And, I don't know, there's just something like when your machines, oops, just knocked the microphone. I'm getting so animated talking about this. It's one of my favorite riding memories, but there's just that moment where it's like your machine is working amazingly and you're in this place and just like your head is clear, and you just have those special moments. But but then on the converse side of it is like, with people, if you went a whole trip without interacting with anyone, that could get like really lonely, and if you only have yourself to talk to, you can end up kind of going a little crazy, I think, too. On the road.
Yes, it's so true. No, I mean, I had a lot of alone time for sure. And it does send you a little bit loopy. And I've had full conversations with myself and the bike, and I would reply. It was a pretty, I knew that it was crazy, and I also sort of laughed about it because I thought it was funny. But it does actually, if you do it for too long, talking to a person, you kind of step off the bike and you're really not with it. Yeah, so I think it was a balance. It's interesting that you brought up, that serenity, right, and being in the zone. I think it's something that I just sort of like, I normalized it, and it was, of course, so special. But after 6 months, it became this new normal, which I think I'm actually going to really struggle going back into the quote unquote real world. It's something that I worry about. I'm very, very happy alone, very happy. And now I'm in an isolation hotel. I'm actually talking to you from a quarantine hotel in New Zealand, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And the whole premise is I absolutely must not have any contact with anyone. So I'm very happy here. Mm-hmm. But I don't want that to be the normal. I'm a little worried about going back and having those like very, normal human interactions. So mm-hmm. That's on my mind. Before we move on, I did just want to make a couple more comments on this idea of special moments.
Yeah.
Because I wrote just a couple of notes when you brought it up. It sort of made me think, what makes a moment special? So what I wrote is, how it comes about, I think, is really what can make it special. So rarity, so the infrequency of something happens. Having a person offer me their home, I would consider that to be a very rare occurrence. The randomness, the unexpected factor, so something that reminds you that life is always changing, that you're sort of like on this boat and everything underneath you is like moving and swirling. I think that there makes a really special moment because it's a reminder that you've got curveballs coming left and right, and never to be too worried about a bad situation lasting, because there's good things always around the corner, in my experience. Yeah. So for me, an example of this would be like, just this total randomness of I would frequently run into people at gas stations who were on similar journeys to me. We just happened to sort of roll up to the same gas pump at the same time. And we'd have these incredible conversations about, where they'd just been or what campgrounds they recommended, and occasionally we'd end up sort of camping together. And the conversations that came from that were just so profound, to think like, I'm doing this, what I would consider to be a pretty crazy thing. And lo and behold, there's someone doing the exact same thing. And tell me the odds of us rolling up to the same gas pump at the same time. Like, I don't even know. So that would bring like a huge thrill to the moment. And I would often think like, this is so special just because of how many stars had to align for us to both be here right now together.
Yeah.
And the other thing I've written down is this scarcity. So when you're away from something for so long and you come back and you find it again, I think that there makes something so, so special. So for me, I had been eating just terribly, like truly my mother would be so disappointed. I'd just eat ramen, pasta meals for one, just freeze-dried horrible food. And then, my friend's parents cooked me a home-cooked meal in Wisconsin. And I just remember like it brought me to tears having home-cooked food. It was so special, and that's something you take for granted, on day-to-day life. So that was, that's definitely, sorry, I'm just talking, but there was just a couple of my notes. And lastly, just the opportunity to learn something new about yourself and be challenged. I think that's really special, because how often do we get presented with an alternative version of how things could be? And, have an open enough mind and heart to think and consider, oh, maybe I didn't have it all figured out. And there is a lot more to learn.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that really, like a friend of mine shared your Instagram account with me, and I was like, okay, cool. It's another person on a journey, because there's, loads of people and journeys and they're all interesting. But the thing that stuck out to me with your journey was that you would stop and actually like almost interview people, almost documentary style, and as a filmmaker myself, I found that very compelling, because that's not the easiest thing to do, to like talk to complete strangers, and then to find, but the reality is like a lot of people will open up, because they're like, wow, somebody cares about me and wants to hear what I have to say, and then, and sometimes they'll share like incredibly personal things. Like I remember one couple, I forget where, I want to say Kentucky or somewhere. And I think the guy was like a truck driver, and he had his girlfriend, I think, with him. And they just talked a little about like how they met, and he was like, I forget how way older than she was or whatever, but you could see the chemistry between them. And
it was Ohio.
It was Ohio. Okay. That's right.
Yeah. A place called Chillicothe.
Yeah. And it was just, it's super compelling. And I don't know, I hope are you gonna put like a compilation of those out somewhere on YouTube? Because that to me, I
Absolutely.
mean, part of your mission was to like, you would ask people, what the American dream is, and I think when, bringing it back to the special moments idea is like, I think the part of the American dream is searching for I mean, everyone has a different interpretation of what the American dream is, and if it exists anymore, or to what degree. But I think those moments were pretty special, where you got a window into somebody's world, and they would, just kind of become vulnerable and get their take on stuff. But yeah, yeah.
Yes. No, thank you for reminding me of that, because that's actually funny. I forget that there was so many elements to this trip, and I only just finished it. You have to excuse me. The last couple of days, I was just gunning it for a flight that I was almost certain I was going to miss. So towards the end, I didn't have the liberty of really stopping and like getting to chat with people. It was mostly at gas stations and eateries. But that was such a special part of the bulk of my trip. I had, as an immigrant, I had become sort of like obsessed with this idea that like, I didn't really know America. I moved to this country, and all I had was this like little window into California, which we all know is not representative of the American experience. It's one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But even when I was at this job I loved, I would say to people like, "Oh, I just want to go and work." I would do like really stereotypical things. I'd be like, I want to sell cigars in Miami. I want to work at a Waffle House in Texas. Like, I want to harvest corn in Nebraska. Like, and that's crazy things to say to a person who's got a career. But like, I was so curious to know what it was like to live in another person's shoes.
Yeah.
And I think America is just like, it's so massive. Now I know that, how can we just say, oh, well, Americans are like this, Americans are like that? I knew that they weren't. It's impossible to pigeonhole them, but I wanted to find out. So doing that question, what is the American dream? I would always pop that on the end of a question of, what is it like to live here? Like, describe what makes your state unique. Like, what's your favorite thing about this state? And people have immense pride about where they live. And I think like starting with that question where they get to just talk about something they love or something they're proud of, and then leading them into a more personal question about the American dream, that helped to sort of like progress, and they put their walls down. But that being said, I mean, plenty of people declined. You just don't see that because I don't include it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, did you find most people receptive to like a solo rider, or even a maybe being a solo female rider? Do you think it broke down more barriers, or?
Definitely. Yeah, 100%. I think it's extremely non-threatening and people are curious, but I think maybe with maybe a solo man, but especially a group of riders, if someone wants to ask a question about the bike or where you're going or what your mission is, I think it can be very intimidating going up to a group, and they don't even have to be on bikes. We're not just going up to random groups of people asking them what they're doing. So I think I was extremely approachable. And being a solo female, I mean, there's pros and cons with that. When I left Tahoe, I thought to myself, how is this going to pan out? Because it could go a couple of ways. There's a safety aspect, but there's also this idea of, like, I don't know, am I putting myself in danger? Well, that depends on my decisions I make along the way. But I don't know. I think at the end of it, what happened was people would come up to me almost constantly, and I would have to decide on any given day, like, how are you feeling? I'd have to check in. I'd say, are you going to be giving off the best version of yourself if people come up to you? Because there'd be days where I'd be in horrible moods. I would be really, I can't explain it. We all wake up in bad sides of the bed, but there'd be some days, especially if I hadn't eaten, where I knew that I didn't want to talk to anyone. And people... Every time I go to a gas station, there'd be someone who wanted to talk. And I learned a lot about myself around, like, if you're not going to be willing to talk to people, you have to pick a location. Like, sure, gas up, but if you're going to eat, go behind the gas station, because you're gonna, and then it would be funny. I'd eat and I'd be all of a sudden like, I'm ready to chat now. Yeah. So, if people come up to me, that's when I spring, hey, I'm doing a YouTube series. I would love to talk to you about where you live. Would you be willing to talk with me? And so often, man, they are, like you say, you give people an opportunity and you show them an interest and a curiosity, and it's almost like they've been waiting for the day.
Yeah.
You'll see some of my interviews that it looks like they've just been dying to chat to someone. Yeah. I don't know if you remember that guy in New York where he had just come back from China. Do you remember him?
I might have missed that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've got them all as highlight reels. So if anyone's interested, you can go on the Instagram and click on, the
okay.
the city.
Okay. Yeah.
But oh my God, he was like a can, like I just opened a can of worms. He wanted to show me every possession he owned. He showed me his calligraphy. He told me his dating history. He wanted to, just share it all. So people like that are just like born to be on camera.
Yeah. I wonder if it's even more of a commentary on like the growing isolation. I mean, I think social media and the virtual relationships, I think, as much as people said, oh, you're connecting, it's like I think there's more than ever that desire for personal connection and talking to somebody face to face. And I think COVID has amplified that even to the next level. So maybe it was people that haven't talked to somebody or had a conversation in a month or two, and I wonder if people were even more primed or hungry to have a conversation with a Kiwi on a yellow motorcycle. I don't know.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, and that's very true. They might not have had a conversation in a long time. Very true. Yeah, I'd say that there probably did add to it. And of course, like you say, the Kiwi accent, that just sends people off. They go, what? Where are you from? And when people ask me where I'm from, I'm like, well, do you want to know where I came from today, where I left on this bike trip, or where my accent is from? Because all of those are different.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's confusing to people. They say, well, what? They always go, well, what are you doing in tiny town, random state? They're so confused. And it's, I'm not going into cities. I'm here to see this, this beautiful countryside, whatever it is that, you chose to live here too, or maybe you were born here, but, tell me what it is that you love about being here. And then, that's what I came here for, actually, was to find out why do people live here? You tell me. It was fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And the cool thing too is I wish more, Americans would travel more in our own country. I had an opportunity through past work as a touring musician. I was able to see a lot of the United States, which I really looked at as a gift because, I think a lot of people, when they watch the news, even here, we don't realize how diverse the United States is, and I don't know. That was. Yeah, so it's cool that you had that experience, but yeah. So I want to talk about your bike for a second. It's a yellow Suzuki Savage, is that correct?
Correct. Yes, my little baby, a 96 single cylinder. Call her Sunshine. Uh-huh. Yeah, no, she's an absolutely beautiful machine, and she came into my life when I first moved to the States. So I had moved from Canada where I couldn't have a motorcycle. It was just too cold. I was in Montreal, so I had been just doing the public transport thing, and I arrived in San Francisco, and I thought, finally, I can get a set of wheels again. So I went on Craigslist, and I love cruises. And I love Japanese cruises too. It's what I've always had. So I went to that section of Craigslist, pulled it up, and I saw her. And, it was like it had more than one owner, but one main owner, lady rider. She'd been touring all over the country with her, not as far as I'd been, but the bike was set up to do a trip like this. It had a Corbin seat, had the cigarette lighter charger, it had hard case saddlebags, Viking bags, and a windscreen. It had all the setup. And when I first bought it, I had no idea that I'd be going out on the road. I bought it to commute from my house to my office, and I did that, for 2 years. And then when I looked at it, I realized, hey, you actually could do this big trip. There's literally no reason why. So I actually didn't have to do a lot of adjustments to it. I more just had to get over the the idea that it wasn't suitable, because it's not true. Sure, I can't go off-road, but well, I do go off-road.
Yeah, I was gonna say you did. If you look on our YouTube channel, most of her camping was off-road, I would say. Yeah, and that's the thing that I think a lot of people I think the perception is changing on what an adventure motorcycle is, because I think, there've been through television or, articles or the sales pitch, right, is that you need this, ginormous, multi-thousand cc, tank of a vehicle to have an adventure. And, I think it's the right bike is for you, is the one that's right for you, and you just like, if again watching your YouTube videos, like you can tell like that bike is the perfect fit for your adventure, for your style, like what you wanted to get out of the trip, and and to get around and to camp and everything. It's like the perfect bike.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to let her know. I compliment her regularly, because that's really what keeps her going, is endless compliments. But yes, like this is a huge barrier to entry for people. They say, well, I don't have a $10,000 bike. I can't do it, which is rubbish. Sure, she was pretty old. And yes, we did have to get some work done along the way. She got a top end rebuild in South Dakota. Shout out to Rice's Rapid Motorsport. They really hooked me up, because mechanics during COVID completely booked out. Like, good luck getting parts for a mechanic on the road. That was a big problem. But they hooked me up with it ended up taking 10 days. Oh my gosh, just to get all the bits and pieces and whatever. But the point is that aside from that, it really was the perfect bike for me. It wasn't heavy. I could lift it up. We fell off. I picked it up. And I knew it. I knew exactly how to ride it. I knew the things that had been done and what needed to be done. I was familiar with it. And I'm trying to think of like any improvements I would make. I mean, there's really nothing apart from putting a sidecar on, and then I get a dog.
Yeah.
That's for my next trip in the future when I have a dog.
Well, that and I think you had mentioned hand warmers in one of your stories somewhere along the way. Gosh, I've had that experience where you feel like you can't feel your hands anymore, and you're just it's brutal. Horrible feeling. Wow. Never again will I take a bike with no hand warmers. Thank you for reminding me of how horrible that was. Oh man. Yeah.
Yeah,
well, that's
but
awesome.
she did good.
Yeah. So do you have what do you feel about like creating special moments? Do you think that's something that people should chase after, or they should just let happen?
Oh, that's a good question. So I would say a bit of both, right? I think you have to be open for the moment to happen. So I think, like in my case, it's saying you're going to just see what happens, load up your bike, and just day one, I swear, is the hardest day, because it's like it's so overwhelming thinking, I have no idea what's around the corner. It might be bad. It might be good. I have a plan in place if stuff happens, but like literally anything can happen. So having an open heart and an open mind to the potential of any situation, then you're basically just setting the wheels in motion for any wonderful moment to happen. So I think planning in the sense of like just honestly having the balls, but like really, truly just like jumping off the cliff and just knowing that you'll be okay. No matter what happens, you'll be okay. And then letting them happen, letting them roll around and just saying, what is it that people say? They say, if it's not there, it'll all be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. So that, and then as for like just those moments are spiritual, aren't they? Those really, like what you were describing in Yosemite, like that feeling of just being like, you couldn't make this in a lab. I couldn't have even told you that this feeling was possible. It just exists.
Yeah.
And I caught it in this fleeting moment. I got to experience it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I think it's a good place to to wrap it
Oh,
up.
sorry.
I can't top that. There's nothing else that I can say to. I think you're 1,000% correct. Like just approaching situations with the open heart and open mind to the possibilities is how you put it, and I think that's I think that's all. I mean that doesn't just apply to adventures, but I think life in general. Kind of the everyday life, because it's easy to get bogged down and and not remember that even when you're not on an adventure. But yeah, that's really amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Nikki. Where can I assume, as we mentioned, people can find you on Instagram at Kiwicruisette. And I didn't realize that you had put those stories and highlights for the interviews. Now I'm gonna go watch this. I totally missed that. There's so many. Instagram like adds a new feature every week, and I can't keep up anymore with their other features.
Oh my God,
anyway,
I know. And plenty of people started following from like ADVWriter.com, which is a little older audience. And I know people start like they got an Instagram especially to follow, because I was just unable to like keep everyone updated across all the different platforms. So there's plenty of people on there who are like, I don't even know what a story is. Like I tell them, watch my story. Like, I don't know what that is. But yeah. So Instagram is where I do all my updates. You can sort of scroll through the history, but there's also highlight reels. And I'm going to be doing a second trip. So now I'm in New Zealand. My next mission is to travel top to bottom. We've got 3 islands, believe it or not. People often think we have 2. I'm going to travel around all of them. I got a Honda Rebel. So nice. I know. So there will be more content, I guess is the point. And then my lunch cutter production. So you mentioned, am I going to be editing all of this, sort of compiling all these beautiful interviews and moments? Yes, I'm going to create an episode per state. So I've only done 1 episode. It's Nevada. It's called, I call it Kiwicruisette and the Search for the American Dream. So that's sort of inspired by those Tintin comics. And so I'll be releasing those right now in my hotel quarantine. I'm editing. So I'm going to be editing each state I'm going to try and do 1 episode a day. We'll see. But those will be getting updated over the next month. They'll be released on YouTube.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much, Nikki. I'm stoked to have you on the podcast and just so fresh off your adventure with that, in your mind and everything. It's just contagious, when someone's like in the midst of adventure or just completed one. It's contagious. So yeah, thanks again.
Well, thanks for having me. Thank you so much.
So definitely go check out Nikki's Instagram. It's at Kiwicruisette. And you can see all on her stories in there in the highlights. You can see each state that she's been to. She has them listed by state. And if you go through there, you can see a lot of the interviews that she did with people on the run. And then check out her YouTube channel. So it's Lunch Cutter Productions. And she's updating those videos as she waits out quarantine in New Zealand. She's got like 14 days, I think, in there. Go out, check out her channel, and you can see all the new videos coming up and some of her older trips. She did a trip around Mongolia with her brother, which was pretty cool as well. So next up is filmmaker Sterling Noren. Now, I've known Sterling probably, 6-7 years. I think I met him at a Tour Tech rally way back when. And Sterling is an amazing filmmaker, and he's an avid writer. And so recently he took a 6,000-mile journey around the United States during the COVID, so he had time off, and he's always wanted to do a journey like this. And he's going to take you on a journey, on an auditory journey. He sent in a video, and you're not going to just hear him speak, but also hear some of the special moments that he had on his trip.
Hey, Sterling Noren here, and I've been asked to tell you guys about some of my special moments riding motorcycles. This summer I took off on an epic 6,000-mile ride across the backcountry of the United States. It was a solo ride, and I had a lot of special moments on this trip, and the ones that I would like to talk about in particular are the ones that involved animals and wildlife, because that is such a big part of a trip like this for me, is to get out in the backcountry and connect with the beautiful natural world, these places that we ride to on our adventure bikes. And so this trip started off pretty awesome down in the desert in Arizona where I live. The first night that I camped out, I was laying in my tent. It was the middle of the night. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and there was a full moon, and I saw an owl come and land in the tree right up above my tent. And he started making his owl noises, so I got out my little handy recorder, and this is what I recorded. So that was the first night of the trip. The second night of the trip, I was a little further north in Arizona, up by Big Lake, 7,000 feet of elevation. And as I was getting ready to go to bed, I noticed right behind my tent a family of skunks. And what was so cool was that the parent skunks, the mom and the dad, kept pulling the baby skunks out of a hole in the ground until there were 6 of them. And they were just scurrying around the campsite like a big, fluffy, black and white pillow. The third night of my trip, I was in Utah, but still in Monument Valley, and a pack of horses decided to come over and visit my campsite. And it was just one of those really beautiful moments, right as the sun is going down and the desert peaks are illuminated in the distance, and here's these horses walking around my campsite. I had a lot of other interesting, unusual, beautiful encounters with animals along the way. A lot of the times as I was riding my motorcycle, they would cross my path, like, for example, deer. I saw several deer jump across the road in front of me, and some of them scurrying up the mountainside. When I was in Wyoming, I saw a pronghorn antelope running off in the distance, and let me tell you, my bike is fast, but those things are faster. One of the best encounters that I had was in a really remote section of central Wyoming. I was riding through the Red Desert and the Great Basin, kind of near the Continental Divide, and I hadn't seen anybody on the roads for the entire afternoon. It was just me and my motorcycle out in the back country. And then I came over a hill, and there was a pack of wild horses running across the road right in front of me. And it was just absolutely beautiful to see them cross the road and kick up the dust with their hoofs. And then I rode right through their cloud of dust. And it was just one of the most memorable moments on that trip. I'm going to have to say, though, that the most special moment for me on this trip was near the end when I was in Colorado. And I was riding on the western slope of the Rocky Mountains, kind of near Black Gunnison. And I was camping out that evening in the Peach Valley OHV area. And again, I was all by myself. I had my campsite set up. I cooked a good dinner. And then I just went for a walk as the sun was going down because I just wanted to take in the beauty of the landscape that was around me. And as I was doing that, the urge to just give a primal howl came out, and I howled like a coyote. I gave my best coyote howl. The most amazing thing happened. A couple seconds later, a pack of coyotes joined in, and I could tell that they were just about 50 yards over the hill from where I was. And you can hear what they sound like. It sounds like a whole bunch of them, maybe a bunch of baby coyotes as well, but to be out there in that kind of place and give my own coyote howl and then have the universe respond with something like that was truly a memorable, if not magic, moment and encounter with nature for me. There you have it. There's some of the special moments for me on my motorcycle adventure, especially around wildlife and nature. And I'm sure you have stories like that of your own if you've been out doing these kind of rides. And if not, maybe you should get out in the backcountry and spend a little bit of time by yourself riding your motorcycle and camping out in these beautiful public lands that we have available, because nature is out there and it's waiting. All right, you guys, that's it for me. Thanks for watching this. Wherever you are, stay safe and ride well. We'll see you down the road.
Pretty cool, right? Getting to hear those coyotes calling back to them and seeing the family of skunks. And by seeing the family of skunks, so if you're listening to this on the audio version, there is a video version of this podcast. So if you go on YouTube and look up ADVMoto, you'll find our YouTube channel, and on there you'll see the video version of this podcast. And I highly recommend doing that because, as I said, Sterling is a filmmaker, and so he's included, which you couldn't hear, but epic shots with the drone of him riding through the American West, and that family of skunks and some deer jumping across the road right in front of him. Pretty wild. But and he's also currently posting episodes, full longer episodes, on his YouTube channel, which is the Motorcycle Travel channel. And on his channel, you'll see, like I said, episodes, he calls it Riding Solo. I think he's up to episode 21 now. On there is pretty cool. And he has a lot of really cool backcountry discovery route stuff, BDR content on there as well. So it's definitely worth your time. Also, while you're on YouTube, check out our ADVMoto channel, our sister show, which is ADVMoto Live. So that is the senior editor of the magazine, Carl, has a show as well. It's worth checking out. And then speaking of the magazine, it's available in print or digital. In the print, it's anywhere magazines are sold. In digital, it's at adventuremotorcycle.com. So if you go there, you can sign up, subscribe, get access to back issues and all that fun stuff. So yeah, so thanks again for taking the time. I know you have lots of things you can listen to or watch or do. And yeah, we're stoked that you stopped by to listen to the podcast. If you want to reach out, you can always email us at podcast@adventuremotorcycle.com. And yeah, that wraps it up for 2020. I am definitely looking forward to 2021, and we have some exciting stuff in store. Kira, Justin, and myself have been planning and scheming, and you guys are in for a treat in the new year. So thanks again, and have a happy new year, and see you down the road.
Live.